Well, I have the great honor to welcome you today, and we're hoping that the recording and all goes well to this podcast on health, nutrition, well-being, finding the best version of ourselves. And you are such a promoter of helping people to find their way into living in their life fully once they have literally gone down the drain. You pick them up again from the lowest place in their life sometimes. Very impressive work you're doing. And I feel very honored and privileged to have you on the call today. I'd just like to really also honor your amazing journey and exploration and achievements that you have actually accumulated over your lifetime. I understand you've been almost 40 years in practicing medicine. And prior to attending medical school, you've been the director of psychological services for 240 beds in patient facilities in Hawaii. You graduated from the University of Hawaii School of Medicine in 1985 and served then as a visiting clinical fellow at Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York City. Underwent training in internal medicine. And from 1991 to 96, you were appointed clinical instructor of medicine at the University of Hawaii School of Medicine. Now, it sounds like for the first 10 years of your medical career, you were practicing in conventional settings of internal medicine as a specialist, urgent care physician, and as an intensivist in ICU and CCU's departments of various hospitals. You seem to have then done a U-turn and searched for more effective and less toxic therapies by training around the world, from Japan to Europe to Mexico and all around the US. And it sounds like now you're really focusing more on integrative oncology and practicing in Thailand, Bangkok, and Phuket. And after this amazing list of achievements and work that you've done in so many varied areas of the medical profession, and also of the many memberships that you are sitting on advisory boards, etc. I would really like to dive in with you with something that we have talked about last time, which you shared, which interests me particularly, is your philosophical and also your spiritual quest that you have undergone and which you started in your teenagehood, very young of age already. So I was wondering if you could dive into that and recap on how did you actually come to discover the world, both hidden and the visible and physical world, in the journey that you underwent when you were a teenager already?
You know, it's hard to say when it all began, but I think it's from being an only child to a single mom, living in Hollywood. I grew up in Hollywood, and she worked in the movie industry, and I saw life. And we moved every year. We moved to a different location in Hollywood. So every year I changed schools. So I didn't have siblings, and then I didn't have a chance to gather friends. So basically, I was alone all the time, and was very. I wasn't lonely at all because I didn't know any different. I just anyway. So my quest was always inward for some reason since I can remember. I always thought about. I wondered about God. I wondered. In fact, I asked my mother one day who God was, and she said, "I don't." She said, "I don't know. When you find out, please let me know." So
where did you find God eventually?
Well, inside and then everywhere.
Amazing.
I mean, there's So, but anyway, that was my goal, my quest, and so but I followed the rules. I went to high school. And I was in college, and I was at that time reading a lot of spiritual books, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads. I was reading Dhammapada. I was reading, of course, the Pentateuch, which is the Jewish first 5 books. I was reading the Quran, just reading every part of it. I was just so interested. And at some point, I think I was in my second year of college, I just realized that there was no role in the Western world that attracted me. I didn't want to be a policeman, a doctor, a lawyer. I didn't want to stand in any of those shoes. And I realized that the life I wanted to lead was a life that was dedicated to, or devoted to, seeking out and finding a relationship with God, or whatever that would mean. And I realized that India was probably the only country in the world that honored that role, that gave that role, a status that exists, rather than being some weird outcast or belonging to some religion, such as a priest or as a rabbi. Instead of that, it gave you the opportunity to freely seek out that. So I moved to India, and I wound up living there 2 years on ashrams, and I finally came to the conclusion that that wasn't going to be my role this lifetime.
Okay.
I wasn't quite ready, and so I actually knew where the goal was at this point. Okay. But I also realized that I'm not ready. I need to play a little bit. I need to have some fun in the flesh.
Okay.
And so,
that sounds good to me. Explore the world deeper. Yeah.
Yep. So that's what I did. I left India. I stuck out my thumb, and I went around the world. I lived in various countries for 2 months in this country, another couple months in that country, and I had no money, which gave me absolute freedom, which is the opposite of how people think. But having had no agenda and no money, made me absolutely free, because I could say yes to anything and everything, and I did. And I just followed my heart. And in those days, it was the hippie days, so there was vans load of people picking me up, and and we went off to Denmark for a few months. Then we went back down to Hamburg, and then we went to London, and anyway, so that was a wonderful time. I finally went back to the U.S., and when I got to the U.S., I said I got to find a job, but I didn't like the U.S. I never liked the U.S. So I wanted to get out of it. So what I did was I thought, I got to find a job. I got to find a role, because I found when I was traveling around, I couldn't work in any country because I didn't have any skills.
Okay.
So that's what I said, well, I thought psychology was the closest thing in the Western world to what I was seeking and what I was learning. And so I did my training in psychology. I think that's what last time I spoke to you, I kind of picked up from there. So once I trained in psychology, I spent, I was probably in my second or third year of postgraduate actual clinical work, when it had become abundantly clear to me that I just didn't understand the human condition, because I didn't understand pathology of what we call diseases. I didn't understand the effect of medications on people. And so I felt, not knowing that, there was a big gap in my knowledge. And so I feel like I couldn't help people completely. And in fact, I found absolutely, there were situations that I simply could not assess because I didn't have that knowledge. And so I went to medical school at that point, just to round out and complete my knowledge, since I thought my journey had already covered the spirituals and the spirit, the body, and the mind, and now I needed the body. So I went into that. And that's why I went to medical school. So it's a very interesting thing, because most of the people in school with me, their parents had been doctors, or, it had always been a lifelong, and it wasn't, for me, it wasn't. It was just to round out my knowledge to be able to more effectively assess and care for people, which for some reason was my calling in life.
Yeah.
So that's, that's kind of how I wound up going to medical school. And then you kind of told the story from there. I went into conventional medicine.
Right.
I worked ICUs, critical care. I liked ICUs or emergency rooms, because those are situations that you can either help or not. Okay, it's not what we call chronic disease. These are acute situations. They're trauma, heart attacks. And the allopathic model, the medical model, actually works in those situations.
Okay,
you
so you
know.
found that was really helpful in those situations, but particularly in that, not in chronic situations. That's
Correct.
interesting.
Yeah.
Distinctive of the two.
Right. If you're having a, you know, if you're, for example, if you're a woman and the baby's coming out the wrong way,
Right.
right? You probably wouldn't go to traditional Chinese, Ayurvedic, or anything like that. You would need to get someone to actually mechanically help you get that baby out. Same thing, you have a trauma of any kind, you broke something, you need to go to a good allopath who knows how to set bones, etc. You know, or you lose a finger, you want to get it back on quickly, you got to have someone who knows how to. Anyway, so there is very important roles for the allopathic physician, but that it is limited to that. In other words, anything chronic, from arthritis to gastritis to depression, whatever it is, they can't. There's no tools, because their only tools, they're only in their armamentarium are drugs, and either drugs or surgery. So, and that's just not going to help. So that's why after about 10 years of working in the conventional world.
Sorry, did you just cover your microphone? Can you just see about the tone just a little bit?
It's
now
not as high as.
You're back. Okay, good.
So that was it. I practiced about 10 years in critical care medicine and emergency medicine, until I realized that even that didn't work. Because I you know, one of the interesting things was I had in critical care, I remember I kept having a patient come back at least every month and he had hurt himself. He was taking drugs, and you know, he had damaged himself. And I realized we would fix him up and he would be out and he'd go back and doing it. And I realized what we weren't doing was teaching him how not to wind up in this situation. So we weren't teaching.
Right.
We were acting like mechanics, as if people were sending their car in and we were fixing their car, you know, and we forgot to talk to the driver of the car.
So it's really reaction to the situation, intervention. You didn't look at the long-term outcome of the intervention, or would sit deeper in the person to really work with that.
Right. And how to truly help them. You know, fixing someone's body doesn't necessarily help them.
Yeah, if you set a car on the same course, driving off the cliff every time, you can repair it, but it's not going to prevent it from keeping on the same course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and that was it. So then that's why. And then I had also been introduced to what I have now come to call metabolic medicine, and that is when you're working with people's metabolism, and you're working to augment their metabolism through natural methods. You know, and to realize that this is just basically, you could look at this if you looked at it, if you had a time lapse. Ability to look at the body. The body's like a very elaborate, complicated flesh tube, like test tube.
Right.
You know, you pour in this, and this happens. So let me give you an example. You got a bunch of kids that are together, and they just met, they're sitting around, and you give them some Coca-Cola and cookies.
Right.
And then watch them. And within 10, 15 minutes, they're buzzing around. So I mean, the chemistry of that, we don't even realize the chemistry. But how the chemistry of our lives affects us is so much more subtle, because we're constantly eating and ingesting these chemicals. Our bodies have become addicted and used to some of them. Others are excitatory. Others are depressants. We're eating a stew of, you know, and we're living and we're being connected. Like right now, we're being bombarded by Wi-Fi, and you know, I mean, it goes on and on and on and on, and so we don't realize that. But that's the chemistry that's affecting us, our consciousness, and all that sort of thing. So, anyway, that's what I found was missing in my allopathic training. Right. So, I left that world, and I went and studied with some of the people that I was reading about, some of the well-known people that I was reading about, like Charles Farr, who MD, PhD, nominated for the Nobel Prize in '92 for his work with hydrogen peroxide, which is a metabolic intermediate in all metabolism, in our body. And it could be, and then he was using it clinically. He was getting intravenous hydrogen peroxide and things like that. Amazing. And ultimately, when you're giving high dose vitamin C, what are you doing? You're stimulating the body to produce hydrogen peroxide.
Okay.
And that's the fundamental thing that happens. So anyway, I studied with Charles for about 3 or 4 months. And then I went to another guy and another guy. I went to Japan, and I went around. And when I finally felt like I had gotten enough, and I even went to Roberts Atkins in New York City, finally,
Right.
the well-known doctor there. And of course, I was the only closet vegetarian at working there. Because if he knew I was vegetarian, I'd be fired immediately.
He would have thrown you out. Yeah, absolutely.
that was not acceptable.
You were the black sheep there.
Yeah, but he liked me. Actually, he called me his heir apparent. He really liked me. He just didn't know that. Okay. He didn't know that I secretly ate vegetables. But anyway, but he very, very smart man. He had accumulated a lot of great knowledge. So I worked there for a while. Then finally, I went on my own, and that was it. So that's how I came to be what is now considered either alternative or integrative physician.
Right. Right. So tell us a bit about what you're doing in that kind of field and how you're working with people out of all that background information you've gathered on all these levels: physiological, biochemical, emotional, mental, psychological, spiritual. Are you working on all these levels now, or would you say there are certain aspects which are more important and essential to actually start working with patients?
No, they're all simultaneous, because what we need to understand, which we, our language, unfortunately, our language, and I don't know if it's just the English language and perhaps the German language, I don't know.
Yeah. That
doesn't allow us to tell the truth.
Okay.
It doesn't allow us to. For example, when we use words, the subject and the verb. In other words, I'm the doer. I'm driving the car. I'm eating the food. And when you think about it, okay, I'm digesting my food right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, how are you doing that? Tell me which glands you're secreting. What is the sequence? By the way, are you beating your heart? And you're breathing your lungs, right?
Yeah.
And it goes on and on and on. You find out we're not doing anything. Life happens to us. Right. But anyway, but because of our language, we separate all these things. But when you're working with people, you have to deal with everything simultaneous, and they all have an effect. For example, somebody who's eating, let's say, fast food, pizzas and burgers and kebabs and like 3 or 4 times a day, and they're working on a project.
Yeah. And
a fly comes in the room. Now, somebody that's been on a 2-week juice cleanse.
Yeah.
And they're driving, and someone cuts them off in traffic, they bless them.
Right.
So, what we're eating, we don't realize the how profoundly it affects even our emotions and our perceptions and all that sort of thing. So I work on it all. And when you have cancer, it's showtime. You can't fool around. You've got to work on every aspect of people's being. So immediately we start with cleansing people with colon hydrotherapy. We put them on juicing. We work with their getting to sleep on time, exercise, lymphatic work, meditation, yoga, very, very essential. Because if you don't calm down the madman inside of all of us, right, you'll continue to be mad. And then while we're doing that, we're doing intravenous therapies like vitamin C and ozone and all those very important therapies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to do them all at once. And when you do that, the people are usually like the first. It's amazing, because I'm in Bangkok 3 days and I'm in Phuket 4 days, and I go back and forth. So it's amazing. I'm gone from either clinic for maybe 3 or 4 days. When I get back, it's amazing to see how the people have transformed in that in that short time. Just from
that's remarkable.
It's wonderful.
Wow.
It's wonderful.
So to unravel that a little bit, because you did mention what we take into our body seems to affect our moods, our attitudes, our mindset, even our reactions to the world, or how we respond to life. What would you say is the major cause nowadays for people being so reactive, being in a state where they might, even like people with ME, just run out of energy or get hyped and then drop away? What happens on a physiological level through that? Is that explainable? Could you shed some light onto that?
Well, yeah, on a physiological, cellular, biological level, basically all life. If you looked out into the universe and then you look down to the ecosystem that we live in, you realize that all life is energy exchange. It's just the exchange of energy.
Right.
And in fact, even things that we would not consider alive, like we don't think of a black hole as a living thing, and we don't think as a supernova as a living thing. But if we look at it from a certain perspective, we'll see that a supernova is spewing out galaxies, right. And black holes, which sit at the center of every galaxy, are sucking it in. So they're spewing out energy and it's being sucked in. And so we see this grand cycle going on in the universe. And that happens down here below the atmosphere into what we call our ecosystem, the biosphere. Right. And we see that every organism is involved in this exchange of energy. The plants are they call them in biology autotrophs. They're the ones that are getting direct light. And light is how energy enters the biosystem. So the plants get it and they use that energy and they turn it into molecules and things that now when the animals, or whether bugs or whatever that eat the plant, they get that ability and all that. So it's energy, and then they become an energy source for something else, and it's the exchange of energy. And to be alive, basically, when I've looked at it at a physiological perspective, to be alive is to be able to hold a charge. And let me give you an idea of how that is. If you had I had you hooked up to an EKG machine, I see your heart rhythm. Now I have a flat line. There's no electrical flow.
Yep.
So what do I do if you're in the hospital? I grab some paddles with a direct current and I try to put the electricity back to you. It's a very fundamental, basic thing that we are able to hold a charge. So if I'm putting these in, and let's say you can't hold it, you're dead. But if after a few shocks you go, you start to see if now you're able to hold that charge, you're back alive again. It's very interesting. I have a potato clock in my office in the U.S. It's a clock that has two electrodes coming out of it. You plug them into potatoes.
Okay.
And the clock works.
That's
the clock works.
Taking energy out of the potato directly.
Exactly, because the potatoes, it's alive. It's got what's called a bioelectric charge.
Interesting.
Now, and you watch over 2-3 weeks as the potato dies, the clock slows down.
Fantastic.
And what I often point out to people, my patients that I work with, is I ask them a rhetorical question: would that clock work if I baked a potato?
Right.
No. So what are we doing when we bake food?
Yeah.
We're taking out what? The essence of life, the energy.
Yeah. We're
taking out the energy, or the ability to produce and maintain energy. So anyway, that's what life's about. And when you have energy, and you jump out of bed in the morning with full of energy, you're in a condition we call health.
Yes.
When you're getting up and you're walking around saying, "Oh, I don't feel good," when you're sick. Sick means you're running out of energy. Old age means you run out of energy versus youth, where you're full of energy. So, we have to look at that. And then when we look at length of years is based upon your maternal longevity of your maternal side. And what do we inherit from our mothers? Our mitochondria. So right. Mitochondria are the little organelles inside of the cell that take oxygen and glucose and very efficiently produce high levels of energy in the body. So in answer to your question, when people are running whatever environment they're in, whether it's they're exposed to chemicals, they're exposed to toxic emotions and relationships, they're exposed to foods, EMF, All of these conspire to fundamentally decrease, damage, produce dysfunction of the mitochondria, and they begin to lose. Their ability to produce energy is diminished, and therefore everything else ensues. So it's that's what we really have to guard. But that's kind of the fundamental underlying explanation of what happens in illness. And so what are we talking about? What is energy again? It's the ability to extract and utilize oxygen, right? And oxygen. So when we get down to it, what is cancer? When those mitochondria, when 40 to 60% of them become dysfunctional, the cell, in order to survive, now must ferment sugar. It can't oxidatively burn the sugar, with oxygen and produce sufficient energy. It has to now ferment, and it's grossly inefficient. It's 19 times less efficient. So therefore, in order for that cell to keep up with its requirements, it needs 19 times more fuel, 19 times more glucose. So that's why cancer
is a huge difference.
That's why cancer is said to feed on sugar. It is. It basically it needs 19 times more. Okay. And that's why when they do PET scans, they inject radioactive glucose. Yep. They wait an hour, then they scan you, and whatever cells are rapidly picking it up at a specific rate, they can say, aha, there's a cancer cell. So cancer is actually diagnosed by the rate at which it eats sugar. Which is, so the more oxygen you have, the less that has to happen. So anyway,
in your situation where you're treating people in your healing centers, are you putting a lot of emphasis on what kind of food they're actually taking into themselves?
Yeah.
Because we're hearing that the sugar diet, we have it everywhere nowadays, is causing a lot of those sort of issues.
Right. Well, that, and that's one aspect of it. Yes. So when someone comes in with the first thing they do need to do is they need to do a thorough cleanse, because we have between 60 and 100 trillion cells in our body, right? And they are swimming in something that's called the extracellular fluid, also known as the extracellular matrix, and it's basically that part of the blood that has, through diffusion, through the capillaries, entered into that space that surrounds the cells, and then through diffusion, through the capillaries on the other side, goes into the venules and is returned to the circulatory system. So the arteries empty and go into what's called the microcirculation. The microcirculation is arterioles, which deliver the blood to the capillaries, where the actual work of biology happens. Everything like the oxygen and the nutrients diffuse across, the waste diffuses out, and et cetera, like that. So that fluid is the fluid in which the cells are having their existence, and it's that fluid to which cells respond to. Because, see, all cells have a DNA, and that DNA is merely a library of potential responses to an environmental situation. The DNA is not driving the ship. It doesn't have eyes. It doesn't know that there's too much glucose out there. It doesn't know that there's a lot of estrogen. So anyway, what's happening is that it relies on the membrane that encases the cell that's in touch with that extracellular fluid to tell the nucleus and the DNA which genes to turn on and to turn off. So remember, I look at the genes and the DNA as a parts department, or or a reproductive organ, whereas the brains is the membrane out there. So anyway, that fluid determines everything. And and the good news is, because whatever that fluid is in that fluid will determine the cellular response. So even if you're eating healthy food, you're eating really healthy food, but you're sitting on the couch all day.
Right.
That means you're not contracting your muscles. Your veins are not, both your veins and lymphatic vessels are not moving along. You're not removing the waste. So you're eating really healthy food, but the metabolic wastes accumulate, and over time you're going to get very sick, because we need to move as much as we need to eat right. And we need to not eat as much as we need to eat.
Would you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because I was fascinated when you last talked about the not eating and the whole connection to the traditional indigenous diets, and how we have actually changed in modern times with the superfluous availability of food 24/7, coming with drones, have it
Right.
everywhere.
Ooh, what happened? I lost.
I can see you still. You just lit up.
Huh.
Not sure. I got you still on video.
Okay, I lost you completely. Oh, there you are. Wait, there you are. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
you.
Are we back?
It's
I
back.
mean,
Okay, good. Yeah, great. We got you. Yeah, so talk to us a little bit about this whole aspect of not eating, because I think that's so new to people because we're so used to eating all the time.
Right, right. In fact, we grow up and we always hear from our parents and from people around us, you need to eat. You got to eat. Come on, eat. It's time to eat.
Starve. You will die
Right.
if you don't eat.
Yeah. Right. If you're sick, eat. You need energy to eat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so this is it's a multicultural, cross-cultural madness.
Yeah.
And it's not all cultures. Indigenous cultures who are actually still earthlings, you know, rather than we've become hybrid mutants. So we're no longer earthlings. We don't. You take our clothes off and you put us in the forest. You know, it'll take an hour or two before we start weeping.
That's right.
You know.
Yeah.
So we just don't know how to make it on this planet. You know, we only know how to maneuver and participate in this artificial environment, that we call civilization, and we call society, and whatever we call it. But it's madness. So anyway, so when we eat, let me preface this with just saying that if we had to look at the aspects of eating, that there's three that need to be considered.
Yeah.
And that is, the most important is frequency of eating. Second is volume.
Right.
And third is quality.
That's amazing to hear it in that order.
Yeah.
That's new to me.
Right. And the reason for that is, and this might become clear in a moment.
Yeah.
But it would be better to eat not so healthy food one time a day than to eat healthy food several times a day.
Wow.
So that
turns them around.
Right. And
so explain that to us, please.
Okay. So and let me also explain too about elimination.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea that if waste does not accumulate, then dysfunction does not occur.
Okay.
And this was proven very what's the word? I mean, well, the first experiment that was ever done to prove this started in 1915, and it was a physiologist who had already won the Nobel Prize in physiology, who discovered that he took chicken hearts and put them in a medium, a nutrient medium, and he made sure that it had a continuous drain, so there was no accumulation of toxins at all. And he wanted to see how long these chicken hearts would last if there was no toxin accumulation. Well, in the early 1950s, he abandoned the experiment, and the chicken hearts were still alive. And chickens just simply don't live that long.
Whoa.
So, right. So basically, the question, in terms of longevity, if we did not accumulate waste,
right?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Excuse me.
So it sounds like that's one of the prime factors of having enough time to cleanse the body, detox the body, eliminate the waste products. That's what Thomas is telling us, and not worry in the first place about the quality, but the elimination of all the byproducts of our exercising, of our metabolizing, and all that.
Exactly. And then so what happens is, if you looked at the body having X amount of energy to do all of its functions, right? And whenever you're eating, now realize that 60% of the immune system, or the actual lymphoid tissue, is in the gastrointestinal tract. It's in the gut, the lining of the gut. It's called Peyer's patches. We have the spleen. We have all these lymph nodes. So 60% of those tissues are in the GI tract for a good reason, because that's the battleground between outside world and the inside world. So anything that's in the tube that starts at the mouth and ends at the anus, that tube, anything that's in there is not considered in the body yet.
Right.
It's not in the body until it gets absorbed through the blood and then it's distributed into the tissues. So it's still outside, just like urine is in your bladder. It's not in your body. It's being held in the bladder. Right. So if your bladder leaked and it spilled in, you wouldn't feel too good. Right. So anyway, but that's the same thing. So as things are moving through the gastrointestinal tract and they're going through the different processes, the enzymes and the mechanical stuff, movement of the stomach, etc. And then they're broken down into very small, simple amino acids, simple sugars, and then they're absorbed. But anything that's absorbed has to quickly be evaluated by the immune system. That's why we have all these lymphatic tissues.
Yes.
Because basically it's determining what it has one question: friend or foe.
That's it.
Right? Friend or foe. If it's a foe, it develops an immune response, and we call it an allergy if it's mild. We call it food poisoning and, death. I mean, we swallow cyanide, then we're dead. So really, you got to look at the, when we talk about toxins, we have to realize that they're at very, very subtle levels of toxins. But anyway, so anything that's ingested that comes in, let's say there's bacteria in the food, which there hopefully is. Hopefully you're not cleaning everything.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's a new concept for most people in the cities.
Oh yeah. They want to sterilize it. And if they were to look, if they were to have microscopic vision and look at their hand and look at their butt, you can't even see your face in the mirror. It's full. You're swimming in these guys that are keeping you alive. Yeah. If we didn't have our microbiome in our gut, we simply could not exist.
So we could say we're never really alone. We're surrounded by a humongous community.
Right, exactly. Right. Larger than the number of cells in our body. But here's a philosophical question. Since these microorganisms in our gut are necessary for us to live, and without them we would not live.
Yes.
Are they really them? Or are they us? Okay, so anyway, philosophical question.
That's a very, very good question. I love that one. I'd love to elaborate on that one a bit more with you in our own time.
Right, we'll do that another time. But
bring it back.
So anyway,
elimination time being
right. So you need
time in a way.
Exactly. Well, at least equal, and maybe more necessary. So now here's what happens. As our cellular function goes throughout the day, all the little organelles in the cell that are doing different functions get worn out.
Right.
They just simple wear and tear, especially mitochondria. Mitochondria, because they're using oxygen. Oxygen is a double-edged sword. For example, it's really important, right? Oxygen is really important, but don't light a match next to it. Because you'll have a problem, right? And so it's flammable.
Yep.
Well, it's also flammable on a biochemical level. As it's being utilized, it's splitting apart into what are called reactive oxygen species, or free radicals. Okay. And these free radicals are actually being used by the mitochondria to capture the electrons in them, the energy. So it's a necessary step. But as the oxygen enters the mitochondria and splits apart into two superoxide anions, and then it goes through the whole process. It's capturing these. That's why interesting. 6 O2s, 6 oxygen molecules, one glucose enter the mitochondria, produce 38 ATPs. ATPs are the energy currency of biology.
Yes.
One glucose, 38 ATPs. That's because of the oxygen. Yeah. So the oxygen and all that. So it's got a lot of those electrons. And in the end, ATP is carrying what? Electrons. In the end, the energy that we were talking about the EKG earlier. What are we talking about? And electricity. It's an electrical phenomenon that's happening. And that's why we are electromagnetic phenomenon. And if you can see our electromagnetic pulse then you are said to be able to see the aura. You know, the aura, it pretty much outlines what we call the aura. You know, and it's why when we talk about getting in my, you know, we have a personal space. If you get into someone's electromagnetic field, then they feel, you know, it's either nice because it's an intimate situation because you like the person, yep, or it's offensive, right? If you know,
I'm just getting an interesting idea in my head that when you talked about the quasars or the supernovas and the dark stars, it's a little bit people that eat all the time become the dark stars because they're just taking light in and energy, but it's not going to be coming out anymore.
No,
you need to be exercising, be active, working for each other, serving each other, be in the world, and stop eating, so we can light up again. I mean, when you talk about depression and all these other things, you go phenomenologically, it's so clear, but it needs someone like you to explain the detail to really get the grips of it, to see how basic this is, but so essential.
It is. Well, and exactly what you just said about depression. Basically, all levels of what we call mental illness or mental disturbance are different degrees of self-obsession. So the most self-obsessed person would be perhaps the schizophrenic, who's having a conversation with themselves, and you know they're completely out of touch, you know, versus the neurotic person. It's self-obsession. You know, again, so you know, not moving the dark star and just taking energy in, and then totally self-obsessed, and that's it, right? Not interacting and all that, not sharing, and you know. So what's the cure? Love, and just start loving, and stop eating. And go for a walk. But anyway,
exercise, yes.
Yes. So what I wanted to touch on too is that when we stop, so anyway, you have all this cellular, intracellular wear and tear throughout the day. So one of the blessings of sleep, one of the reasons that God finally puts our head on the pillow every night is so that we finally stop eating. Because we're not smart enough to stop eating.
Which is another interesting aspect in terms of nowadays, we sleep so much less.
Yeah. Exactly.
I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on that issue, because that's really concerning a majority of the people, particularly younger people nowadays. And we're seeing obesity and ADHD and allergies and everything that is under the moon entering into childhood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're diabetes type 2. We're seeing in 9-year-olds. It's what, you know. But yeah, in fact, there's a whole discussion around sleep. And let me just summarize it by telling you something that I never thought I would say. And that is, it's probably the most important thing you do. It trumps diet.
Okay.
I hate to use the word Trump nowadays, you know, because we've got to come up
with the English.
Right.
But we like our puns.
Okay, it doesn't trump it. Anyway, overpowers, what's the word? And that's a good name for him. He's got the right name. But by the way, this is not political. But we'll talk about sleep, and I'll talk about that in a minute. That's a very good question, and I'll just touch on it. But what I want to let you know is that when we go to sleep, what's happening is, remember, every cell in the body needs approximately 1 billion ATP at any moment in time to perform all of its functions. Okay? So when you're in sleep, you're not eating. You're not eating, therefore you're not absorbing glucose. And we talked about the body as having a finite amount of energy. So if it's busy processing foods, then it's not cleaning.
Okay.
Because it has two functions. It processes foods, or it starts cleaning out waste, right? So if we had 100% energy, we'd say that the person eating, anywhere from 70 to 80 to 90% of the energy is being used on digesting and processing and bringing it in and all that, and putting it in the right place and all those sorts of things. And there's a little bit of being cleaning, otherwise you wouldn't survive. Now, when you stop eating and there's less, and as it gets all digested, and once everything has been absorbed out of the GI tract, now the body starts to clean itself, because it now has that energy to clean itself. And why is it cleaning itself? Why would there's a process that the Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded, I think 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, for a phenomenon that was identified by a Japanese physician, a scientist, called autophagy. And autophagy, self-eating. And so what happens is when you stop consuming, in fact, at nighttime you go to sleep, when you stop consuming, what happens is the lysosomes, which are other organelles, they're the recyclers, they're the garbage cleaners, right? Pick up the trash. They go around and they find all the old mitochondria and they gobble them up and use them for energy. Because remember, we need to keep glucose. We need 1 glucose, 6 oxygen. So if you take all these worn out organelles and use them to produce energy to maintain that. And so, and of course, as it eats these old mitochondria, it stimulates the production of new ones. So you crawl into bed exhausted, because now instead of making 38 ATP for every glucose molecule like you did in the morning, maybe at 9 p.m. you're only making 26 or 27. You're not making enough because your mitochondria have been beaten up by the free radicals, by the superoxide anion, the peroxide, etc. So now you go to sleep, all those old ones are eaten up, and now you have all these brand new, your cells plush with mitochondria. You jump out of bed in the morning. So you're told you need to eat to get energy. Well, that's not true. I just went to bed. I didn't eat, and I got energy. So hey, wait. What were you saying, Mom?
Yeah.
Hey, Mom, I didn't get that. You told me I need to eat for energy, and I stopped eating, and I got energy. How'd that happen? It happened because whatever you ate needs to be utilized. And if you're busy eating, you can't utilize it, right? In other words, so that's why when they say breakfast, the most important meal of the day, you need to eat it for your energy, is probably, it's up there with one of the greatest lies ever perpetrated upon the human race. I think maybe the first one is that the greatest lie is that health is impossible and disease is inevitable.
Right.
Because of that, we have health and we have disease insurance.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera.
We're made dependent with it. And I mean, I was so liberated when I realized I don't have to have my breakfast when I get up. But it's eaten into you when you're a child. If you don't, you won't survive the day.
Exactly, yeah.
It was so freeing to wake up and not eat and go for the morning and then not even be hungry.
Exactly.
It's remarkable.
Well, what we call hunger is really appetite.
Yes.
Okay, and there's a distinction between appetite and hunger. But you're right, and the word breakfast is just basically breaking your fast. So there's no time to it. You can break fast. You can breakfast at 12 noon. You can breakfast at 1 p.m. It doesn't matter. I mean, it would be the most important meal of the day if it were the only meal of the day.
Yeah. So when would that be the best period, in your opinion, from your research and experience? What's the period when we're best off eating?
Right. I would say probably between let's say eating would take about 1 hour. So I would say anywhere from around 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay.
Because so they're 2 to 3, 2:30 to 3:30, 3 to 4, around that time. The reason you want to stop around 4, the reason is the day's winding down. Okay. So you're because you got up early, because you went to bed early.
Yeah.
Okay. So your day's winding down, and you're going to go to bed around 8 or 9, like a diurnal creature would normally do under natural circumstances. There's no artificial lights. You're diurnal. You go, and you live in the places where humans arose out of, and humans arose out of the tropics and subtropics. We did not arise. You don't find chimpanzees and gorillas in Denmark. They just aren't there naturally. You might find them in a zoo, but that's it. Yeah. So the point is that humans, our niche, our habitat, is the equatorial and subequatorial zones, right?
Okay.
And out of that, and so that's where we belong. And in that niche is the diurnal rhythm that we would need to live by. So clearly, if you live in Germany, you live in Denmark, you live in Sweden, you've got to get an eye mask. You still have to follow during the summer month. You have to stay on that rhythm, okay? Because but anyway,
right. So that's a huge change in terms of our habits, but in terms of our DNA and our makeup, we're still functioning internally and consciously on those diurnal rhythms. So
well, actually, you know, our diurnal rhythm is actually a function of the rotational velocity of the Earth.
the natural
You know, and the Earth is
yes,
it's spinning, it's spinning, and everyone's diurnal cycle is either 23.5 up to 24.5 hours. So something in there. And it has to do with that rhythm. And there's a reset point at around 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. or 12:30 a.m. that it's kind of like the reset point. And that's the point at which you want to have already had several hours of sleep, of restorative sleep, so that you would have restored your pituitary gland, you would have restored your adrenal gland, you would have restored all your other endocrine organs, so that when that reset thing occurs at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. or whenever it is for you, that you're now able, because that's when you start to produce growth hormone. That's when you start to produce your adrenaline and cortisol. I mean, cortisol. And so all those things start to happen around 12:30, 1 a.m., whenever your reset is. So if you went to bed at 11 and you just had 1 hour of restorative sleep, you're not going to have a really good output, you know, et cetera. I mean, that's just one of the aspects of sleeping.
Okay.
That's very important. But also during restorative sleep, you need to have stopped eating several hours before you went to bed, because you need to be out of the absorptive phase, right? So now that you go to sleep, and now your body can do autophagy and clean up very nicely, and therefore help restore. But if you ate an hour before, now you're going to go to bed, you're still absorbing. So now your body can't go into a full-blown autophagy. So you might only get some of the benefits of sleep the last 2 hours, the last 3 hours, instead of the whole thing. So anyway, so it's, you know, all of this happens. It turns out that living according to nature is perfect. And you know what you have to know in order to do that? Nothing.
Yeah.
You have to know nothing. In fact, the less you know, the more compatible you will be with being an earthling. You know, because you know, dogs don't know what they're doing. Yeah. And birds, the flock of birds that's turning perfectly without rehearsals, without having attended aviation academy, how are they doing that? Because they're 100% in touch with a phenomenon known as instinct. Yeah. And instinct is the divine web by which all creatures are connected to the wisdom of God or wisdom of nature, however people want to view that. But and we're cut off. By the age of 3, it's done. Stop, no, don't. Stop, no, don't.
Absolutely.
To a 2-year-old, to a pre-verbal 2-year-old, you're telling them no, stop, don't. You've just told them that their instincts are unacceptable. And here's what we do. It's called
cut off from nature. I mean, that was my biggest suffering that I experienced as a child, being cut off from nature. Don't touch anything. It's all dirty. You know, it's all full of germs. It's a tragedy, really, to see that we're taught the wrong ways in the first years of our life, and then we propagate it and just multiply it.
It becomes our fundamental belief system.
Yeah.
You know, and just by the word dirt, a pejorative term. Yeah. It's a pejorative term instead of using the word earth. Yeah. Instead of your child walking in with some earth on its face and stuff, and you say, "Oh, you look wonderful. You look earthy." Yeah. We say, "Oh, you're quickly. Let's clean that off." You know. And anyway, so I want to get back to the autophagy. So it's the period of not eating. So the intracellular cleaning up. Yep. Cleansing, detoxification occurs during not eating. Okay. Now, without that, you won't. You'll just accumulate more. Your mitochondria will run down. You'll have less and less energy to perform your stuff. You'll start fermenting, and the more you ferment, the more the cell ferments, the more it becomes closer to becoming cancer or some other condition. Heart disease. It's all the same thing. It all has to do with the same dynamics. But on an extracellular, outside the cell, the physiology of cleansing, as we talked about a moment ago, and that is movement. Yep. Contracts the veins and the lymphatics and helps you get rid of the metabolic waste. Without that, they'll accumulate as well. Movement also gets your heart moving, so the pump gets more efficient. And actually, if you think about the heart, you can't call the heart a system. you have to understand that without the lungs, there is no heart, because the right side of the heart pumps to the lung.
Yes.
The lung exchanges the gases and puts it back to the left side of the heart, which pumps to the system.
Right.
So it's really the cardiopulmonary system. There's no cardiac system.
Right.
Right. It's the one. Yeah, it's one hand on the left and the right hand, and so that dynamic, the cardiopulmonary thing, is when we talk about aerobic exercise. When we're doing aerobic exercise, that's what you're improving. You're improving the ability of those two things to work more efficiently together, right? And that's why the athlete is said to have, the athlete has a resting heart rate of 50.
Yep.
Because his ability to pump and extract are much better optimized than the non-athlete, and and that's what happens.
Doctors get scared when they test my ECG or do my ECG, because I have a 52, 54 resting heart rate. They go, it's too low.
Right. Exactly. See, and they see that.
I was active all my life, so
that's it.
Normal. Yeah.
You're exactly right. But if you were a sedentary person, right, and you start to get older, now that is pathology. Your heart, because now really you're sedentary, your heart can't do that extraction, and your lungs can't do that work together. So in other words, in order to stay alive, you actually need a more rapid heart rate.
Yeah.
But now if you're not capable of maintaining a rapid enough heart rate, you go into what's called heart failure and stuff like that. So but they don't what they need to do is
compensates. Yeah.
Exactly. It will compensate. So they need to, those doctors need to check your oxygen level and find out that you're well oxygenated with a low heart rate, which means it's okay. It's okay.
Totally fine. So I'm intrigued about all those very simple aspects of life that you're bringing back into people's lives. It raises the question in me, how do you, when you first meet people, help them to unlearn and maybe trust those natural rhythms in themselves again, because they have been covered up in a way with all the cultural and other learning that they had to undergo through their life?
Right. Unfortunately, the impetus to change for the vast majority of us, and it turns out that our two best friends are what are known as pain and suffering.
Right.
Only with pain and suffering do we have the motivation to change. Otherwise, you try to tell a 15-year-old who's eating pizzas at 2 a.m., drinking beer and smoking cigarettes, that this is really not, it's not good for you. He wakes up 3 hours later, says, I feel fine.
Yeah.
What are you talking about, Dad? What are you talking about? I feel great. So you can't explain it to them. It's not until they go, So anyway, pain and suffering. So usually the people I see come to me with that in that situation. They've been told by others that they have 3 months to live. They've been told, or they just have no energy. They have severe pain. So those people are really motivated. But we also have a detox center in Phuket where we work with the average person who's just toxic and they haven't yet had a diagnosis, right? So with them, again, they realized somewhere inside of them that they needed to cleanse. Somehow it became apparent to them. Yeah. So what I do is I start teaching them the truth. And just like we've been discussing now, when people hear the truth, it's like the truth is actually recognized. Innately, we recognize the truth. So when we learned how to count to 10, and then someone said, by the way, 1 and 1 is 2. We went, yeah. Right? You don't go, I don't know. In other words, the truth is, wow, it feels good and it's easily recognized, and it's always simple.
Yeah.
You're right. And so I always explain to my patients, if someone's really complicated and you're scratching your head, it's not true.
Yeah.
Right. The truth is very simple. When I took physics class in pre-med, the only time I missed a problem is when I overthought it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Physics was always, it's just what it is. It's simple. Right. And that truth is that way, so that's why when I say these things, people get excited because they go, yeah. And it kind of undoes it. It's like you've got all this darkness and mystique
right.
around health and disease, right? You put in a little bit of light, all of a sudden it's not so dark. So when I give talks and I talk to people, they realize, oh yeah, wow, that's right. That's how it is. You know, there's not all this ridiculous stuff. It's simple. It's simple. You know, a dog can do it. A bird can do it. A horse can do it. They don't go to seminars.
Yeah.
They live out their full intended lifespan. They achieve what's called optimal functioning, right? And they don't go to any seminars. Oh my God. So here's the thing. It's innate in us. So, and it's very simple. And I just remind people. So I don't think that I teach anything. All I ever do is remind people what they already know.
What's that?
And you know, if you think of the word ignorance, the root of the word ignorance is to ignore.
Right.
And basically we're ignoring the truth because the truth is obvious. It stands on its own feet, its own platform. It needs no references other than a moment's observation, a moment's reflection. The truth is apparent. And so that's what I do. You know, I wake people up to reminding them about the simplicity and magnificence of the truth. And once you know, then okay, so let's go. And then I teach people. But here's 3 things that people have to leave with.
Yeah.
They have to come and they have to get a change in the database. In other words, it's not complicated. It's simple. Here's how the body works, blah, 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 blah. They need to get the tools. So when you leave and you go back home, you'll know what to do. When do I go to sleep? How do I prepare healthy foods, etc. And number 3, if you don't have number 3, then those other 2 are just theory. And that's called the experience. Yeah. So they have to have had at least 7 to 10 days of cleansing to say, oh, wow, I see, I get it. Without that experience, it's theory, and theory doesn't take you very far. So you need those 3. Those 3 things have to happen at our center in order for you to go out and actually maybe change your life. Right, maybe.
People stay long enough with you to develop those new habits. They have a lot of support there where you are. And just to round it up, because we're almost up to an hour, and I'm sure we will have another opportunity to elaborate on other questions that are arising in this talk. How do people find you? What do people get out of the week or the 2 weeks they're staying with you? Who would be advised to come and see you in your healing centers?
Very good. Well, everybody, you know, when we realize that what we call aging and what we call disease, right, is just an accumulation of toxins, right? Because remember the chicken heart. The chicken hearts, you know, how long could they live? You know, so the point is that, and then it's interesting. So we accumulate toxins, metabolic waste. Now, when enough of them have accumulated in our different endocrine organs, then our endocrine organs start to produce less hormones, and then we get aging, right? So it's not that because we age, our hormones decrease. It's because our hormones decrease. We age. It's another way of looking at it, and that happens through metabolic. In other words, why am I saying that? Why can I be so confident? Because we see cultures, the Hunzus, we see the people in Peru, in Vilcabambam. They're 110-year-old men fathering children.
Whoa.
Right? You know, so yeah, right. So we see, right, and the women go through menopause, start menopause much later. Okay. Because here's an interesting side phenomenon. I always get sidetracked, but it's hard not to. But a woman who goes on a raw food diet, complete raw food vegan diet, within a period of time, whether it's 6 months, a year, they start menstruating much less. And they would come to me and say, what's happening? I've only had my period 3 times last year. It's because of a big, the monthly menses is really more of a detox than it is as a physiological requirement. Now, it has nothing to do with fertility. Right. It's just, you don't have to do that. So anyway.
Wow. That sheds a lot of light on that.
Yeah. And it happens uniformly. It's not just once in a while. Any woman who goes on who thoroughly cleanses and starts eating 100% raw or close to it, will find that they're just not menstruating very often. Things go into balance. It's just phenomenal. So anyway, so why should people come? Because we're all accumulating toxins, and what we need to learn, just as if you had a nice automobile, let's say you purchase whatever kind of automobile you purchase, if you don't change the oil about 4 times a year, after a couple of years, you just can't drive it. It's not going to go anywhere.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have respect for the cleansing requirements, the renewing of requirements of these mechanical entities. Instead, what we don't realize, this machine, I mean, you scratch it and it heals. Scratch a Mercedes, scratch a Maserati, it's not going to heal. Okay, so this is a little bit better.
Person after you.
But you heal, yeah, right, you will. So, but anyway, so this machine, this beautiful thing needs to cleanse. See, normally, if we're eating a normal diet, healthy diet, we'd be in an environment where we'd eat once a day. Maybe twice a day. You might come across some fruit and maybe nibble on some fruit for a while. But when you're eating nutrient-dense food, you don't have a gnawing appetite. Yeah. Because all your needs have been satisfied, and you're not being bombarded with artificial stimulants to eat this, eat that.
Yeah.
So anyway. We all need to cleanse. We all need to learn how to cleanse. And so somebody would come to us to do that. The other thing we do is we teach people to go to sleep early. We put them to bed early. Yeah. And they get up in the morning, and then we take a walk on the beach. A beautiful walk. And the beach is always warm around here. The water is always warm. Okay. A nice walk on the beach in the morning. We do yoga. We do meditation, mindfulness. We have silent walks. We reacquaint people with the earth, and we help reestablish that relationship. And the more you clean out the toxins, the more you become aware of that aspect of yourself that is non-physical. Because the more toxic you are, the more of a body you are. The less your body you think, then you kind of look around and you realize, anyway, so it's a whole major process. So who needs to come? Everybody needs to come. There's nobody that doesn't need to come.
It sounds like everybody who wants to live a long, healthy, joyful life, being chronically ill or not, as you said, as we're aging, we need your support, what you're doing in your centers. I'm certainly intrigued. I can't wait sooner than later to have a time with you and get my body recharged and reset, because as you say, it's totally necessary. And I think most people don't value their own body as much as they value anything that they have in their life around them as objects, which is
exactly right. So, we have there's no maintenance and upkeep. Yeah. We just assume.
Put it out
and we expect high performance. We expect high performance without maintenance.
So where do they find you? Give us your contact details so people can find you.
3 locations. My flagship places in Arizona, an Oasis of Healing, and then I consult in Bangkok and Phuket. So to find me specifically, I have I do have a website, drthomaslodi.com, drthomaslodi.com. God, I wish I could write it out, but I have an email. It's I have an Institute of Integrative Oncology, so IIO Health Center at Gmail. IIO Health Center at Gmail. Okay, so it's IIO Health Center at gmail.com. But that's how you, and then also, it simply is, and you can go, there's another website that you can find a lot of information and how to reach me is stopmakingcancer.com, which is my clinic, my oasis in the US.
Okay.
We're in Phuket, we're called the Life Co, like the Life Company, Life Co, the Life Co.
Okay.
And then of course in Bangkok, it's Akisis. So I think instead of trying to do all that stuff, just, find me, contact me. We can figure out wherever you are in the world to find the best location. I circulate between all of them because, it's just necessary. So.
Sounds fabulous. Sounds delicious when you talk about all the amazing food that people learn to eat again. And what's amazing is you getting people in touch again with a higher self of their own being, but also with nature and connecting. It sounds fabulous, and I can't wait connecting with you again.
Yes, please.
Really grateful. Many thanks for your time. I know you have so much to do today and you got up early. I probably sinned today because I'm going to go to bed late.
Yeah. You'll know it tomorrow.
Catch up tomorrow, yeah. But I'll be in nature. I'm a nature boy, so I'll make get some good sunlight and make up for it. And looking forward to see you soon. And blessings on you, your staff, and your centers. Looking forward to speak soon.